This lesson for our Cornea Project class titled Time Compression, Accelerated Decay. Teach us to number our days that we may apply our hearts unto wisdom. And we'll be studying a lesson from Genesis about days and nights. Here we have an image of Adam, obviously an image depicting his age at 930 years. And then we have someone of our present time and 93-year-old, and you can notice both endured the same amount of decay, only at different rates. And the time it takes to get to 930 years of decay, we can do the arithmetic. 93 times 10 is 930. It only takes 93 years to experience 930 years of decay. So why we should all learn to number our days and apply our hearts to wisdom. Here's a timeline showing the drastic reduction. You remember Adam was originally created without an end to his lifespan, and he was told that in the day, so we have a 1,000-year period of time. He lived 930 years, Methuselah 969, Noah 950, and shortly after the flood, we see the reduction. 175, 120, 70, and 75. So it's quite drastic, and it's alarming because God is being gracious and kind to reveal to us how we should value life itself. And if anything, if we want to quantify that, we should value our days 10 times more than those who lived before the flood. Exponential decay curve in Old Testament genealogies. Here's a link to the paper, or a paper about this. This is a paper which is to derive a mathematical equation that predicts with reasonable accuracy the lifespan of people born after the flood, given the number of years that they were born after the flood. Now, they're developing a model reflecting the numbers in the Bible. And here's a quote from John Sanford, Genetic Entropy, his book. He's professor at Cornell University, and he referenced this paper by Holliday and Watt, 2001. He said, "My colleagues and I have done a more complete analysis, producing more striking results." So I recommend you read this. This is a resource I was directed to by Dr. John Penn. Here's a chart that I noticed is quite alarming as well. Sometimes when we see something so vividly displayed. So here's the decline of lifespans after the flood. Here's the equations. I highlighted the information very of great interest to all of us, whether you're a scientist, a politician, or involved in religion. But we're looking at 73 years. This, of course, is from lifespans of people born after the flood. Also here, the model and variables. The goal was to predict a person's lifespan from how many years after the flood they were born. And you can pause at any time in this video. You can download the PDF. Do your own arithmetic, as Dr. John E. Penn always recommended. Why include this constant? They give the rationale for it, showing the Masoretic text fits level off around 70 to 75 years, consistent with Psalm 90, verse 10. And you can stop here and review this yourself, but you can notice we've lost almost 400 years just after the flood from what is how quickly it was declining. It was a severe drop off. And now we see 73 years. Again, you can look at this yourself because this is really fascinating to see how much research they invested noticing the numbers in the Bible. And of course, you'll receive criticism and you might trigger someone when you're using Bible numbers, but in the seminary, numerics and the knowledge of the numeric value for each letter in the Bible was a very common thing to know, and was certainly nothing to which we were taught to avoid. So here's an equation. You can read this, and I had it described in English so you can read through that, those of you that want to take your time to do this, but certainly this is not a math class, and when you see the end of the video, it's hardly an arithmetic class, but again, it's very profound, the lesson we can learn. It says here again, 73 years, matching the table. Here, half-life. You see how quickly this again shows the sharp decline. And here a description on the left at 0 years after the flood, lifespan started near 470 years. It says the curve then drops off quickly. The point marked half-life shows that after about 136 years, lifespans had fallen to halfway between the starting value and the long-term level. That long-term level is about 73 years. And here is information about research titled Degeneration and Exponential Decay Curve. Now, what's interesting about that expression exponential is back to the title of this lesson, Accelerated. Exponential decay is just simply a more formal way of describing that we are dying faster, approximately 10 times faster than prior to the flood. And here's a reference again, the conference paper, original presentation of the model, and again, exponential decay curve in Old Testament. And here we'll notice that among scientists, politicians, and religionists, they all three share one thing, people, and people all share same thing, namely blind spots, and we have built our lives according to assumptions we had to make until we acquired the knowledge. And if we weren't trained by someone who went before us, then we have a greater investment in our assumptions, and we learn to navigate life accordingly. And if we find them useful and comfortable for us to serve our interest, we might not ever find a compelling reason to stop and evaluate even the terms we're using, and are we even conflating terms. So the failure to distinguish between ontological age and metabolic biological age decay, and that's the process of aging and the time something exists. We've talked about this, perhaps dozens of times in this class in lessons we've done over a rationale for a recent earth creation expressed by the ratio in the scriptures, showing how self-evident it is that decay will compound according to the number E, just like interest rates compound according to the number E. Ontological age refers to the absolute age of something, and here again, the earth, determined by scientific methods like radiometric dating. Actually, radiometric includes the decay. And of course, as previously stated, among scientists, there seem to be people there, and people seem to be biased and might not even have a reason that compels them to distinguish the decay from the chronology, and then notice the ratio or relationship according to which the decay compounded, which would always be the number E, which is very powerful. And this says it's the time since the Earth's formation and is a key piece of evidence supporting the vast time scale of geological and biological history. So it's easy, if you're in the field of religion, to notice the errors and assumptions of the scientist, which now has been artificially partitioned, since we all seem to be willing to ignore that theology produced science, which means science is theological and evolution is not scientific. But that would be quite a 180-degree turn, which would be too severe for most of us to be prepared for. A metabolic biological age decay refers to the natural process of decay. Again, that process is what's accelerated by 10 times, and aging that occurs in living organisms. This is why, as I was given an honor unintentionally, that is, it wasn't perceived as an honor by those who gave it to me when they abandoned 238 providentially hindered people, and those people were all in a condition where they weren't able to be active as they once were. Their good days didn't always occur on Sunday. And when they did occur on Sunday, they were there at the church house, which was quite remarkable to me to think that one of their good days, perhaps one of their best days of their last days, they would spend it in the Lord's church. So as I interviewed and counseled and consoled them and come alongside to comfort them, they would always express a sense of, let's say, they were startled, that is, by the unexpected suddenness of their age. It's as though yesterday they were young, active, and able to go about and work and be productive and engage in their garden. I spoke yesterday with a 94-year-old gentleman who, the first thing he said, he certainly misses his garden and being out there with his tiller. But we talked as though it were just yesterday he were there, and yet he's 94 years old, And in the Old Testament, it would have taken 940 years for him to have incurred and experienced the amount of decay. So yes, it is conclusive that it is disorienting how quickly we wake up one day in a body that is failing us, that has declined in a manner so rapid that we were not even able to keep up with it. Conflicting worldviews, of course, this is what achieves source bias and then subsequent source avoidance. Our bias is intrinsic, our avoidance is an outward reaction. So it compares the young earth view, have theological beliefs that align with a literal interpretation, which contradicts a scientific understanding. Now notice the blind spot. A literal interpretation of chronological years is not a contradiction of anything. In science, there's been no tabulation or calculation of the number of chronological years, according to which the amount of decay that has been observed and measured would have compounded. And you can see now they don't have a compelling reason to make that argument or case or even investigate it. And religionists don't have any compelling reason, except the Bible does. The Bible shows us a God in heaven, as we call him our Father who art in heaven. And we notice that he loved us and he let us know that we should value our lives today 10 times more than they did prior to the flood. Many hold an old earth view, which contradicts the biblical understanding of the earth's age. Again, you notice earth's age is now a superordinate category that includes two things: ontological and metabolic biological decay, age. And yet it's not being distinguished in the conversation, and it's simply conflation. And we notice that often in religion, often in politics, and often in science. So it's nothing alarming to us. It's just, it helps us understand the truth first, the urgency of the moment, how precious, valuable life is for us, and why to serve God with your mind is of utmost priority, to apply your heart to wisdom, our thinking processes, guard our heart, assure that we're occupied until Jesus comes and not preoccupied in the futility and emptiness of the folly that this world's culture has to offer us. There's a lack of scientific understanding, so there's sympathy towards us who some say we might not be able to understand the scientific methods, of course, how to determine the Earth's age, such as radiometric dating. Again, you can see the persistence in the conflation of the two terms, because here it's not distinguished. It's not indicated that radiometric is including the physical and chemical forces that are applied to something that would accelerate the consequence that they then measure. For example, magma from Mount St. Helens is measured 10 years after the eruption, and they say it's thousands and thousands of years old. Well, actually they're measuring the consequence of both physical and chemical forces. So that measure is correct. It's just placed in the wrong category. That is, it's considered chronological rather than the geological age that results from the consequence of physical and chemical forces. A lack of biblical understanding. There are those who, without an understanding of historic holistic hermeneutic methods, they might ignore Bible numbers. Of course, in the seminary, you're taught very early that the Hebrew language is numeric, pictographic, and phonetic. The Greek language is also, each letter has a numeric value. So that's nothing that we would find necessary to avoid or against which we would hold a bias. People don't notice ratios, instantaneity, or the evidence supporting creation theory. Again, we can know because of divine revelation and according to the science, which is a product of theology, the rate at which the decay compounded, and even notice how important it is for us today to teach this and admonish our fellow men and love our neighbor and warn them of the brevity of life. Scientific bias motivates the presentation of metabolic biological age data as the measure of chronological ontological age. And notice when people make the presentation, whether it's politicians, scientists, or religionists, by not making this distinction, they fail to communicate the urgency of the lesson to number our days and learn to apply our hearts toward wisdom. Misinterpretation of the term age. Again, it's as simple and clear as point number 4 in the Historical Holistic Hermeneutic textbook of the late Dr. John E. Penn. Point 4 is define your terms, but we are often reluctant to do that because the reality of the meaning of a word might not correspond to the perception according to our assumptions that we've made and according to which we have been governing our lives. Focus on biblical interpretation. Some individuals prioritize their interpretations of the Bible over scientific evidence. Again, that's the assumption that those are in conflict. And then conversely, some individuals prioritize their interpretations of science over biblical evidence. Again, the only problem that scientists, politicians, and religionists have are that they're people. And as long as we're people and acknowledge the fact that we're finite, fallen, fallible, mutable, and sinful, then we can take that off the table and approach carefully in the humility that would result in a hermeneutic that presents a point of view from where no contradiction exists. Here again, lack of education, critical thinking, a lack of scientific literacy. A scientist would perceive us as lacking information, and then we would perceive them as lacking biblical literacy. And here is an excellent statement that science always begins by making assumptions. These assumptions serve as starting points. But now if you don't go back and review your assumptions, let's notice it says it's like believing that nature follows consistent rules or that our observations reflect reality. From these foundations, science then moves to formulating hypotheses, which are clear, testable ideas that can be checked against evidence. Richard Feynman once said, it is scientific only to say what is more likely and what is less likely. So, considering the data that we have, the obvious data that demonstrates the number E is the rate according to which decay is compounded in the universe, just as interest compounds according to that number, we can notice that it's more likely that the relationship between the ontological age of the earth and the metabolic biological age of the earth, that it's more likely that that relationship is in a ratio according to the number E. Here the Bible says, I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and nights. The Bible distinguishes this very carefully. Here's 6,250 years at 12 hours per day. Here's 6,250 years at 12 hours per night. Here's 12,500 years at 24-hour day nights. But you notice these do not exist in linear. That is, we don't have daytime first, then nighttime, except in our experience. Now, in our knowledge, we now know that while it's daytime for us, it's nighttime on the other side of the earth as the earth rotates. Now, it might have once been assumed, as Dr. Penn said, they did not count nighttime. They only counted days. And when we ask someone how many days there are in a month, I do it often now, they'll say 30 days. And I said, why didn't you say 30 days and 30 nights? And it never occurs to us to even speak that way, much more think that way. So night only at 12 hours per day, each night that is. This is just a graph depicting where night is occurring at 12 hours per night. Remember, Jesus said there's 12 hours in the day. So here's 12 hours in the day, and he was expressing the same urgency from Psalm 90 that we must work while it's day. He said the night approaches where no man can work, and it's a gracious message from the Old Testament all the way to the New Testament, from God the Father who led people to write the Old Testament scriptures to now Jesus Christ himself on the earth, the one in whom the fullness of the Godhead dwells bodily, appealing to us to recognize there's only 12 hours in the day. Here, 12,500 years at 24-hour day nights. Again, you notice it's compressed, however. It's taking place within a 6,250-year timeline. 6,250 years at 12-hour day nights compressed, which is what is sometimes, as Brother Penn said, it's so obvious it's hard to see. And that's because he often reminded us, as his research assistants, Eddie Johnson and myself, that we need to stop and see the forest and the trees. So that's what we've done. And it was certainly a deliberate effort to do that. And here, Johann Kepler, the German astronomer and mathematician, here's a quote by him. He said, "It is a right, yes, a duty to search in cautious manner for the numbers, sizes, and weights, the norms for everything God has created. For he himself has let man take part in the knowledge of these things. For these secrets are not of the kind whose research should be forbidden. Rather, they are set before our eyes like a mirror, so that by examining them, we observe to some extent the goodness and wisdom of the Creator. Again, let us apply our hearts to wisdom. And then in conclusion, with a very simple arithmetic that brought Dr. John E. Penn great joy, because he said, it's so simple, anyone can calculate it, but it's so profound, no one can refute it. And he really enjoyed that. So you can look at this and notice, I'll just take you to where it's highlighted. It said when one multiplies 4.5 billion years times 1,000 days, notice 1,000 days is approximately 2.78 360-day years. It equals 12.5 billion years of compounded decay. Now that's in the universe as a whole, and then the 4.5 billion refers to the earth. So this is a good lesson. Let us all take heart. Again, there would be no reason to be disappointed in politicians or scientists or religious people, because until COVID-19 came, there was no compelling reason for people to set out on a global investment in seeking vaccinations for the cure. And just now, as today, we have global investigations in retrospect to review and revise what actually took place. So we're hearing the good, the bad, and the things we don't want to believe about each other. But again, as long as there are people involved, we'll all have bias, and according to those biases, we will exercise and express source avoidance for those who don't operate according to our assumptions. So thank God for his revealed word and the knowledge that we have thereunto appertaining. Have a blessed day and enjoy this lesson.